If this episode makes you think, please let us know in the comments and support us by subscribing and leaving a review. Thank you. Today we are exploring AI in education policy and 5 principles that could determine whether technology earns its place in a classroom. It should be educator-led, ethical, accessible, transparent, and protective of student data. Those principles appear in a Dear Colleague letter published on August 20th, 2026 by the United States Department of Education's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education and signed by Assistant Secretary Kirsten Basler. The letter responds to rising concern about screen time in schools, while making the case that educational technology should be judged by the learning it produces, rather than by screen exposure alone. I think the letter makes a useful distinction. Watching short-form entertainment for an hour and using text-to-speech to access a complex novel both involve a screen, but they're plainly different experiences. One may encourage passive consumption. The other may give a student with dyslexia access to learning that was previously out of reach. A simple screen time count can't capture that difference. The same applies to a student in a rural community joining an advanced mathematics course that their school can't staff locally, or a homebound student participating in a classroom discussion. According to the letter, educational technology can expand access to tutoring, world languages, dual enrollment, and career-focused courses. Those are specific benefits, and they matter. Yet I'd be careful about moving too quickly from different kinds of screen use exist to duration. Doesn't matter very much. Duration still matters. So does what the screen displaces. A purposeful digital activity can run too long, interrupt conversation, or reduce time spent making, moving, reading on paper, and working with other people. Educational value and duration need to be considered together. Think about a Year 8 geography lesson on coastal erosion. Students might use satellite imagery, compare changes across several years, and ask an AI chatbot to suggest explanations for what they observe. That could be a valuable 20 minutes. If the AI chatbot writes the final analysis and the students merely paste it into a document, the same 20 minutes has much less educational value. The device hasn't changed. The quality of thinking has. That's the non-obvious point in this letter. Screen time is a poor substitute for instructional judgment. We need to examine what students are doing cognitively. Are they choosing evidence, testing an explanation, and correcting the machine? Or are they watching, clicking, and accepting? The real value is not in what the machine produces, but in how the student responds. The letter also raises the standard for edtech procurement. It argues that states and districts should consider cost, accessibility, compatibility with existing systems, implementation support, and evidence of impact. It specifically encourages independent evaluations and randomized controlled trials, where participants are assigned to different groups so researchers can compare outcomes more reliably. That sounds sensible. But there's a tension. The letter itself makes broad claims about technology supporting learning without citing particular studies in the text, while asking providers to produce rigorous evidence. Perhaps the underlying evidence exists elsewhere, but this document doesn't show us enough to assess the strength of those opening claims. I'd also resist treating randomized controlled trials as a magic stamp. A product may perform well with intensive training, reliable devices, and strong technical support, then disappoint in a district where teachers receive a 40-minute webinar and the wireless network drops out. So we need to ask, why did it work, for whom, and under what conditions? The letter does ask those questions, and I'm pleased it does. Evidence travels badly when implementation conditions are ignored. If you value this kind of practical analysis of AI in education, follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you don't miss future episodes. For a school leader, these education technology guidelines create a demanding but useful responsibility. Buying the license is the easy part. The leader needs to define the learning problem, establish a baseline, train staff, review classroom use, and decide what evidence would justify renewal. Usage numbers won't do it. 10,000 logins may impress a vendor and still tell you almost nothing about learning. A department head planning professional development could take one existing unit and compare 3 versions: no technology, purposeful technology, and technology that adds activity without adding learning. Teachers could then examine student work and discuss where judgment, feedback, and productive struggle became stronger or weaker. That's more valuable than a tour of tool features because it starts with why, not how. There's also a serious equity dimension. Accessibility is a foundation, not an optional add-on. Text-to-speech, speech-to-text, captioning, and visual supports can open grade-level content to students who need them. But access also depends on devices, connectivity, language support, and teacher confidence. A state policy can promise opportunity, while local capacity determines who actually receives it. The letter links its recommendations to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act. It also points to Louisiana, Arkansas, Indiana, Michigan, and Texas as states exploring contracts with shared performance measures, stronger privacy expectations, and clearer implementation support. That approach is promising, although performance-based contracts can create awkward incentives. If payment depends on a narrow test result, providers may optimize for that measure. Districts may also favor students most likely to show rapid gains. Contract design shapes behavior. This is why public policy has to look beyond procurement day. Governments can set evidence standards and student data protections, but they also need to fund evaluation capacity inside districts. Otherwise, sophisticated suppliers arrive with polished evidence, while overstretched local teams have little time to test the claims. Google or any other large provider can offer scale and familiarity. Neither popularity nor brand recognition proves educational value. Secretary Linda McMahon's earlier principles for responsible AI education offer a sound floor. Educator leadership, ethics, accessibility, transparency, and privacy should be expected. As the letter says, responsible design alone doesn't guarantee effectiveness. A safe tool can still be educationally pointless. My view is that this letter moves the conversation in a healthier direction. It rejects crude arguments about all screens being equivalent and asks for measurable instructional value, but measurable shouldn't become narrowly measurable. Curiosity, confidence, independence, and the quality of classroom dialogue matter, even when they don't appear neatly on a dashboard. AI in education policy will succeed when evidence, professional judgment, and local context are held together. Remove any one of them, and policy becomes either vague aspiration, rigid compliance, or expensive guesswork. Don't count the minutes a student faces a screen. Account for the thinking, opportunity, and human connection those minutes create. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.